My own sister watched me bleed out in the snow and checked her watch. I was pinned inside my crushed car, gasping for air, looking right at Bonnie standing by the guardrail. She didn't call 911. She didn't scream for help. She just stared at me through the shattered windshield, waiting for me to stop moving. The betrayal hurt more than the metal crushing my legs. She hadn't just cut my brakes. She was staying to make sure I died. The steady beep of a monitor dragged me back from the dark. I blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, my head throbbing like it was split open. A nurse stood by the bed, adjusting my IV drip. She didn't look relieved to see me awake. She looked anxious. She checked the door before leaning in close, her voice a whisper. She told me my sister had been there every day, not holding my hand, not praying for my recovery. Bonnie had been cornering the doctors, demanding to know when they could legally declare me brain dead so she could activate a power of attorney. The room spun, and it wasn't just the concussion. My own sister wasn't waiting for me to wake up. She was waiting to sign my life away. I'm Hannah, 29 years old, and I manage logistics for a global shipping firm. I know how to spot a hostile takeover. And this was exactly that. Bonnie didn't just want the money. She wanted to erase me. She wanted to turn me into a ghost while I was still breathing so she could play the grieving heiress without the inconvenience of a living sibling. My hospital gown had shifted, exposing the jagged, white scar running down my left forearm. I stared at it, and suddenly, I was 10 years old again. The smell of smoke filled my nose. I saw Bonnie standing in the hallway of our childhood home, a box of matches in her hand and the curtains fully engulfed in flames. She wasn't scared. She was smiling. When our parents ran in, she pointed a shaking finger at me. Hannah did it. I took the beating that night. I took the blame because that was my role. I was the shield. And she was the golden child who could do no wrong. I traced the old scar with my thumb. My parents had trained me to be her scapegoat, to absorb the consequences of her destruction. They taught her that fire was a toy, and I was the water bucket. But they were gone now, and the woman lying in this hospital bed wasn't a scared little girl anymore. Bonnie thought she could burn my life down one last time and walk away clean. She was wrong. I wasn't going to put out the fire this time. I was going to let it consume her. I couldn't just confront Bonnie. I had to outsmart her. I asked the nurse to initiate a Jane Doe protocol, wiping my name from the hospital registry. To Bonnie, I was now a ghost. I borrowed a phone and called Paul, our family attorney, and Ryan, a private investigator I'd worked with before. Ryan moved fast. Within hours, he had the financials. Bonnie wasn't just greedy. She was underwater. She owed $185,000 to loan sharks, and the deadline was 48 hours away. It wasn't a tantrum, it was a hit. Ryan confirmed it with photos from the impound lot. The brake line on my car hadn't snapped. It had been cut. Cleanly. Mechanically. I stared at the grainy image on the small screen, feeling a cold calm settle over me. Bonnie needed money, and she needed it now. The only thing standing between her and a payday was my pulse. But she had made a mistake. She assumed I would die quietly. Instead, I was about to use her own desperation against her. She loved playing the victim? Fine. I would give her the ultimate tragedy to star in. Paul set the stage in his office with the precision of a surgeon. He called Bonnie in, his voice grave, telling her there was a complication with the payout. She arrived 20 minutes later, vibrating with nervous energy. I watched the feed from the hidden camera. She looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting around the room, sweat beading on her hairline. She knew the loan sharks were running out of patience. Paul sat behind his massive mahogany desk and laid 2 stacks of paperwork between them. He explained the situation with a heavy sigh. Stack A was the standard homicide investigation protocol. Since the police had found the cut brake line, the insurance money would be frozen for up to 3 years, pending a full inquiry. Bonnie's face went gray. She didn't have 3 years. She didn't have 3 days. Then, Paul tapped Stack B. He acted reluctant, like he was doing something unethical. He told her there was a loophole. If the damage was self-inflicted, if Hannah had been unstable, depressed, suicidal, the case would close immediately as a tragic personal act. The money would release in 24 hours. He watched her, waiting. It was the ultimate test of her character. Bonnie didn't hesitate. She didn't ask about my reputation. She didn't care about the truth. She grabbed Stack B. She looked Paul in the eye and lied with a smile. She told him I had been spiraling for months. She told him I talked about ending it. She signed the sworn affidavit framing me for my own attempted murder, her pen scratching loudly in the quiet room. She thought she was manipulating him. She thought she had won the lottery. She had no idea she just signed her own confession. Bonnie's voice filled the room, smooth and poisonous. She looked at Paul, her eyes wide with fake sympathy, and told him I was broken. She said I had been talking about ending the pain for months. She signed the affidavit with a flourish, the scratch of the pen against the paper sealing her fate. She handed the clipboard back to Paul and asked when the funds would be released. She was already spending the money in her head. She was already erasing me. The door to the adjoining conference room clicked open. Bonnie spun around in her chair, annoyance flashing across her face at the interruption. But when she saw me, the annoyance died. Her face went slack. The color drained from her skin until she looked like the wax figures we used to see at the museum. I walked into the office, the heavy oak door closing behind me with a final, solid thud. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't a memory. I was the woman she tried to bury. Standing 5 feet away, holding the digital recorder that had captured every word of her perjury. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner and the shallow, rapid hitch of Bonnie's breath. She looked from me to Paul, then back to me, her brain misfiring as it tried to reconcile the sister she killed with the sister standing in front of her. Then, the shock broke. It didn't turn into remorse. It turned into fury. Her hands curled into claws on the armrests of her chair. "You set me up," she hissed. The venom in her voice was thick enough to choke on. "You set me up. You made me do this." She lunged out of the chair, not to hug me, but to attack. She was screaming now, the mask of the grieving sister completely gone. She yelled that it was my fault. If I had just given her the money, she wouldn't have had to cut the brakes. If I hadn't been so selfish, she wouldn't be in this mess. It was the logic of a parasite blaming the host for dying. She truly believed that my refusal to be bled dry was a crime against her existence. The door to the hallway burst open. 2 uniformed officers and a detective stepped inside. The room instantly shrank. Bonnie scrambled back, knocking over her chair, trapped between the desk and the police. The detective didn't waste time. He informed her she was under arrest for insurance fraud, first-degree perjury, and attempted murder. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. I didn't yell back. I didn't cry. I watched the officers wrestle her toward the door with a clinical detachment. For 20 years, I had tried to fix her, save her, and hide her sins. I had absorbed her explosions like a blast wall. But looking at her now, twisted with hate and shouting obscenities at the police, I didn't see my sister. I saw a malignant tumor that had finally been cut out. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the clean, sharp relief of a diagnosis confirmed and a cure administered. The silence she left behind when the door closed wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Bonnie clawed her way out of holding 6 hours later. She didn't have cash, so she signed her life away to a predatory bail bondsman, handing over the title to her Mercedes and the vintage diamond necklace she'd swiped from our grandmother. She walked out of that jail with empty pockets, no car, and a burning need to destroy the one thing I had left. She didn't run. She came straight for the house she thought I was sleeping in. I sat in the passenger seat of Ryan's unmarked sedan, parked 3 houses down, watching the thermal feed on the dashboard monitor. The house stood dark and silent against the snowy lawn. To Bonnie, it looked like a sleeping target. She didn't know I had opened the smart home app 4 hours ago and remotely shut off the main gas line. I had drained the veins of the house dry. We watched her heat signature break the back window. She wasn't there to talk. She was carrying a heavy red canister. She moved through the living room, dousing the furniture, the fumes likely choking her, but she didn't stop. She wanted to scorch the earth. She wanted to burn me alive. She struck a match. I saw the small flare on the screen. She threw it. It sputtered and died on the rug. She struck another. Frantic now. Confusion setting in. That was the signal. The floodlights from the police cruisers hidden in the alleyway turned the night into blinding day. Bonnie shielded her eyes, screaming as the tactical team breached the door. They dragged her out in cuffs, kicking and spitting. There would be no bail this time. Attempted arson. Breaking and entering. Violation of a protective order. I didn't look back as the squad car drove away. The next morning, I listed the property. I sold it to a young couple who didn't know about the ghosts in the walls, or the hate that had soaked into the floorboards. I signed the deed, handed over the keys, and walked away from the wreckage of my childhood without glancing in the rearview mirror. People ask me if I regret it. They ask if I feel guilty for sending my own sister to a 6x8 concrete cell. They look at me with eyes full of pity and judgment, wondering how I can sleep at night knowing my only sibling is wearing a state-issued jumpsuit. I sleep just fine. In fact, I haven't slept this well in 20 years. The day of the sentencing, the courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the overhead lights. The judge didn't look at Bonnie with sympathy. He looked at her with disgust. He called her actions predatory, calculated, and devoid of humanity. He sentenced her to 15 years in state prison for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and first-degree arson. She won't be eligible for parole until she serves at least 12. But the prison sentence wasn't the only receipt she paid. The court ordered restitution of $245,000 to cover the damage to the house, the legal fees, and the emotional distress. She doesn't have the money, of course. She will spend the rest of her life with her wages garnished, paying for the ruin she tried to bring down on me. The social fallout was just as absolute. The friends she tried to charm, the doctors she tried to manipulate, the loan sharks she tried to outrun, they all turned their backs. In our small community, the name Bonnie isn't whispered with gossip anymore. It's spoken as a cautionary tale. She wanted to be famous. She wanted to be the center of attention. She got her wish, just not in the way she imagined. She became the villain in her own story, and for the first time in her life, she couldn't cry her way out of the narrative. 6 months after the trial, a letter arrived at my new apartment. It was a plain, beige envelope with the Department of Corrections stamp in the corner. My name was scrawled on the front in Bonnie's familiar, loopy handwriting. I stood in my kitchen, holding it. The old Hannah, the scapegoat, the fixer, the sister who just wanted to be loved, would have torn it open. She would have searched for an apology, a sign of remorse, a reason to forgive. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I knew exactly what was inside. It would be a manifesto of blame. She would tell me how hard prison was. She would tell me our parents would be ashamed of me. She would try to hook her claws into my guilt one last time to drag me back into the mud with her. I didn't open it. I didn't burn it in a dramatic fire. I simply dropped it into the trash can on top of the coffee grounds and eggshells. It wasn't a ceremony. It was a chore. Taking out the garbage. That was the moment I knew I had truly won. Indifference is a far more powerful weapon than hate. Hate means they still matter. Indifference means they are gone. I'm telling you this story not because I want you to applaud my revenge, but because I need you to understand the anatomy of the monster I lived with. Bonnie wasn't born evil. She was made. She was the forever child, the golden one who was never told no, who was never allowed to fail. Our parents taught her that her needs were paramount, and that I existed solely to service them. When you grow up as the scapegoat, you are trained to catch the glass before it hits the floor. You are trained to apologize for bruises you didn't cause. You believe that if you just work harder, love louder, and give more, eventually they will see you. Eventually, they will love you back. That is the lie that almost killed me. If you are currently holding up the sky for a family member who would watch you be crushed without blinking, I need you to hear 3 rules. These aren't suggestions. These are the laws of survival I learned in the wreckage of my car. Rule number 1. Blood is biology. Loyalty is a choice. We are conditioned to believe that shared DNA is a suicide pact. We are told that family comes first, and you don't turn your back on family. But what happens when family turns their back on you? What happens when the hand supposed to hold yours is holding a knife? You do not owe your loyalty to your abusers just because you share a last name. A title like sister or mother is earned through behavior, not granted by birth. If they threaten your safety, your peace, or your future, they lose the right to that title. Rule number 2. Silence is your sword. For years, I argued. I explained. I defended myself. I thought if I could just explain my side clearly enough, Bonnie would understand. But toxic people don't listen to understand. They listen to find ammunition. Every time you argue, you feed them. You give them the emotional reaction they crave. The most devastating thing I did to Bonnie wasn't trapping her in that office. It was refusing to scream back. When you stop engaging, you starve the beast. You force them to sit alone with their own madness. Rule number 3. Healing isn't forgiveness. It's indifference. Society tells us we have to forgive to heal. We see it in movies. The tearful reunion, the hug, the I forgive you. But forgiveness requires repentance. You cannot forgive someone who isn't sorry. You cannot forgive a predator who is still hunting you. I didn't forgive Bonnie. I accepted her. I accepted that she is a person incapable of love, and I removed her from my ecosystem. My healing didn't come from a magical moment of grace. It came from the quiet, boring peace of a life without drama. It came from waking up in the morning and knowing my brake lines were intact. I have a new life now. I have friends like Ryan and Paul who respect me. I have a career I built on my own merit. I have a home that is safe. I am no longer the supporting character in Bonnie's tragedy. I am the protagonist of my own life. So look at your life. Look at the people sitting at your table. Who are you setting yourself on fire to keep warm? Who is draining your bank account, your energy, and your spirit, and calling it love? You think you can save them. You think if you just give a little more, they will change. They won't. The only person you can save is yourself. Cut the cord. Walk away. Lock the door. Because if you don't cut the cord, they will eventually cut your brakes. I am Hannah. I survived. And I am finally free.